one of the big areas of interest at the moment, I've been involved, I was thinking probably 5 conferences or webinars on this subject, on variations of it, over the last few weeks, because it is sort of very much the topic of focus at the moment, is something that has various names, but the most popular one is this idea of the 15-minute city or the 15-minute neighbourhood. And the idea is that you should be able to reach everything that you need on a day-to-day basis within 15 minutes walk of your home. And that will be, that is seen to be probably an ideal arrangement to aspire to, at any rate, when planning places for the future and trying to reshape them for the future. Its most prominent proponent at the moment is the Mayor of Paris, which is why this is written in French. So I presume this is Le Paris de 4 heures or something. No, that's 4 hours, isn't it? 4 heures. But we've got, I've done as far as I can from my school day French, done a quick translation. So if we put that into the Scampton Estate context, basically it's saying wherever you live, it would be great if you could learn, work, recycle things, shop, and be entertained, or entertain, I suppose, get healthcare, get exercise, perhaps produce and consume local produce within 15 minutes walk of your home. And if we then took a place like Lincoln, a bigger settlement, then you'd see Lincoln as a series of 15-minute neighbourhoods. You'd see larger villages as perhaps several 15-minute neighbourhoods. So that it's a concept. It's intended to illustrate principles. It won't necessarily work exactly in every case, but it's something that it is certainly high up the list of priorities for planning at the moment. So we've looked at that for Scampton Estate, and we found that it's almost ideal. The arrangement of the estate lends itself very well to taking that concept and those principles as the starting point for thinking about any changes for the future, any growth in the future. And what we've done here, there's a great website that enables you to map very quickly 15-minute walking distances from anywhere. So what we've done, excuse me, is we've taken 2 points on the estate, which we think are probably respectively the most remote from the access point, from the main entrance, on the west side and east side. And we've taken those, drawn the 15-minute boundary. So this is supposedly, at any rate, the area that you can conveniently walk to within 15 minutes. Obviously, this is all averaged out because some people walk much quicker than others, and there's issues. Anything like this, there will be variations in detail when you really get down to it, because of different routes that people use and things that may not have been obvious to the computer algorithms that were putting this all together. But basically, from there, the blue line, the blue dotted line and the blue shading shows the 15-minute zone. And from there, the pink line and shading, red line and pink shading shows the 15-minute zone. And the bit that therefore becomes a bit purplish, because it's the overlap in the centre, is the area that everybody can reach within a 15-minute walk, which is great because that's where most of the community facilities are. And as you see, we've mapped those. So we've got the shop and the hairdresser, we've got the youth hub, the gym, the community gardens, the skate park, squash, all of it. And most of those are actually within that purple bit that everybody can reach within 15 minutes walk. So basically, the arrangement is very good. And we want to make sure that as things move forward, that isn't lost and that the benefits of that are carried forward. Excuse me a second. So that's the if anybody wants to try it themselves, it's called travel time. That's the thing that we used. And that's one that's actually showing it the other way around. So this isn't the way the 15-minute neighbourhood sort of principles diagram in French that I showed you works. That works from somebody's homes. So that's the centre. In this case, though, we've taken the centre of that central area, the communal centre, and if you do it from there, then this is people going back, I suppose, to their homes. Then it covers just about the whole of the developed area, if you exclude the runways of Scampton RAF base. So as I say, it's a good starting point. We then looked at the neighbouring parts. So there's Woodland Edge and the college on the south side of the road there. At the moment, their 15-minute walking zone is skewed heavily to the south because there really aren't very good footpath connections to the north, to the estate. But if you just quickly go back to that previous one, as you'll see, that affects the extent of these as well. But if you were to connect here, you would find that they would automatically fall within that same 15-minute walking distance of the sort of the communal heart of Scampton Estate. And then we've looked at Scampton Village, and as you see, you can get quite a long way from Scampton Village within 15 minutes, but you can't get to Scampton Estate and vice versa. So there's an issue there, particularly as these houses here are really so close to these houses here that it leads you to think that perhaps there's something that needs doing. And the reason there's something that needs doing is because the existing network of footpaths and bridleways and things is fragmented. And it's become fragmented because of the security issues of the estate and the fact that I suppose it wasn't a great idea to have people wandering across the runway anyway. But if things are going to change as far as the use of the place is concerned, it should be an opportunity to rebuild some of the connections that have been severed. For instance, Polyplat Lane once connected direct through to Scampton Village, which would have overcome that very large walking distance problem, which I'll just quickly run through and show you on here. This is showing how long it takes, how far you can get within various times walking from a house in the middle of Scampton Village. So that's 10 minutes, that's 15 minutes, that's 20 minutes, 25, 30, still not actually into Scampton Estate at that point. It's basically about an hour if you're going to walk from Scampton Village to Scampton Estate. And at that stage, you're only just getting to the shops and the community facilities. And if you lived over there and you're wanting to walk back the other way to the village, then you've got over an hour to get from one place to the other, but it's a tiny distance. So, as I say, it all shows that things aren't that great, and that's the cycling one, which shows it's much quicker to get to Ingham from Scampton Village than it is to get up onto the estate. Okay, so we're going to have a quick look now at some of the features of the place and how they might influence planning for the future of it, and what are the good things, what are the bad things, how we can move forward. Although it's all been developed by the RAF, the Ministry of Defence, there's distinctive characters to different parts of the area, different parts of the place. And I just want to pick up on some of these because they tell us things about what some of the principles that might be applied to any growth in the future. One thing that we found in talking to people that was reflected very much in the responses to the questionnaire, and it is immediately apparent to anybody coming into the estate, is that by comparison with a lot of urban places, and by urban places I don't mean necessarily big cities, but that includes villages as well, it's very green, it's very spacious, there's a lot of grass, there's quite a lot of trees, could perhaps do with more trees and more vegetation generally apart from just grass, but it is a very sort of pleasant green place. There's various different layouts. So as a planner, I'm particularly interested in the way that places are laid out and the way that that affects people's lives and gives them opportunities or denies them opportunities for different types of living and different types of moving about. And in the estate, you've got different layouts. So you've got conventional streets like these, which are very spacious, mostly detached houses, and say large gardens, large front gardens, a generally spacious sort of tree-lined atmosphere. You've then got areas like this that are quite distinctive in their own way. They're not as spacious in the sense of the houses aren't as big and the gardens aren't as big, but they're set spaciously in green space. This Radburn word is something that the MOD seems to have been particularly keen to pick up on, I suppose, back in the 60s and perhaps into the 70s. It's an approach to planning that originated in a place called Radburn, New Jersey in the USA. And it basically tried to orient houses along a footpath network with sort of rear access for vehicles with their fronts facing onto the footpath. Generally, it's had mixed success. It's not as extensively used in Scampton as it is, for instance, in Hemswell Cliff. And as I say, it's not necessarily been the success that the originators of it hoped it would be. But again, it does have the benefit of giving this sort of green, pleasant, spacious layout overall. Again, a different type of conventional street, in this case, semi-detached, so a little bit more compact, a little bit more dense, but still a green setting. And then quite distinctive, a number of these, which we've referred to as perimeter blocks, because it's basically describing what you see, that there's blocks, the housing forming a block facing outward around a space in the centre beyond the gardens. Perhaps some of you are living in some of these places and I'd be interested to know a bit more about how those spaces are used and what the future for those might be as green assets moving forward. But it's a very distinctive layout and creates some very distinctive opportunities as well. And then if we go beyond the wire, we assume that the wire will eventually be less of a barrier, hopefully no barrier at all, and that there'll be integration of the whole area. And the areas used for the accommodation in these H blocks and the long blocks here is basically a campus layout, blocks within large spacious landscape grounds. And that's something that provides for some higher density accommodation close to the centre, which is a good thing because again, it helps to support those facilities. And that might be subject to conversion in the future, or it might be subject to redevelopment, but it's an opportunity for some higher density development, either retained or recreated, which has benefits. And then looking just outside, we've got the eco-housing at Woodland Edge, which tells us something about where housing ought to be going from now on. So any new housing that's added to the estate perhaps ought to be learning some lessons and developing even further from the houses that have been built here, certainly in terms of their carbon emissions and their overall environmental impacts. So again, lessons to be learnt from what's here and to be applied as principles for what might be. And as I said, we've identified then the central area, which isn't a traditional village centre, but it does have a concentration of the community facilities as being a real asset because it is so accessible to so many people. And even with some growth, it can still retain its accessibility and the green space can still be retain, because that's so much of an asset that people value from what people have told us so far. And building on that idea of the green spaces, then, as I said, our perception is, and it's been reflected in comments that we've received as well, that whilst the green space is good, there's perhaps almost not exactly too much of it, but perhaps there's too much bare grass, and you wonder whether there's opportunities to use some of the grass more productively. And by productive, I don't necessarily mean the inset one there that's showing sort of forms of allotment and forms of communal gardening, so productivity in that sense, which is good, and there are opportunities for that, but also productive communally and recreationally, and perhaps as areas where, as a community, you can create new pocket parks, new areas for people in the various neighbourhoods within the neighbourhood to really think of as their own, and perhaps to create new facilities for all ages, just to basically make the whole place better for spending more time. And I think if I go back to the pandemic lessons that we think are emerging, it is likely that the combination of that, responses to climate change and technological change anyway, are going to mean that things like working from home, working close to home, are going to become more of a norm in the future. And the home environment is going to be probably more important, even more important to people from now on than it has been up to this point. And if you just hold those images in your mind, and think, and this is exaggerated because of the camera angle, the camera lens that was used, but big area of, I was going to say nothing, but green niceness, if you like, but green not doing very much, that could perhaps do more in the future. And so perhaps we need to look at these and think about, each part of the estate, people coming together to think, well, what could we do? How could we get some funding? What opportunities are there to really start to make this work even better for us? And these are just sort of composite images showing some ideas of what, based on what people have done in other places. And there's lots of opportunities for that, lots of organisations that will help with that, and lots of sources of funding, which doesn't necessarily mean you get it, but you can at least apply for it. Similarly, there's opportunities to fund rural community energy schemes, and that can be everything from domestic generation of energy house by house, to looking at some of the green spaces for generating different forms of renewable energy, and taking examples from elsewhere, RAF in Norfolk, where departure of the RAF has actually led to a large area of the space between the former runways being converted into a solar farm, now generating both energy and an income for the local community. So there are some interesting challenges and some interesting opportunities to look at there. So what we're doing is trying to sort of bring all those things together to develop them into a series of principles for the future, to retain what's good, to strengthen what's good, to make sure that anything new that's added really follows best principles of sustainable development. And part of this is getting this balance of jobs and housing right. And in very simplistic terms, and as I say, we do look at this in the context of the work that the councils are doing on the Central Lincolnshire local plan as well. In very simplistic terms, if you get many jobs and few houses, you get a lot of people commuting into a place, which is probably, in view of all the things I've said about climate change and changes in expectations about the relationship between home and work, probably not a good thing. If you get few jobs and many houses, you get everybody commuting out, which again, for the same reasons, is probably not a great thing either. So you really want to get the right relationship between jobs and homes, which includes people working from their homes, but also includes making sure you've got the right sort of employment opportunities coming in for people to be able to choose to live and work within close proximity of each other. So getting on to this whole issue of potential growth. The map that's up there at the moment is from the work that's been done to build the evidence base for the Central Lincolnshire local plan. The evidence base, every local plan, every placemaking framework has to be based on evidence. There has to be some factual reason for coming to the conclusions and deciding on the principles and formulating the policies and making the allocations that you do in a plan. And it can't be just, well, we like the look of that, so we're going to do it. There has to be some reason behind it. For the Central Lincolnshire local plan, one of its big jobs, and this isn't necessarily what the councils would ideally want to be focusing on, but the way that government policy emphasises things, one of the big jobs that has to be addressed is finding land for new housing right across the district. And the way that is done, which isn't necessarily the best way, but it's the way it has to be done at the moment, is to invite landowners and prospective developers to put forward pieces of land that they would like to see developed for whatever reason, and they ask the council, could you please allocate this for development in your local plan? That's what they do. That doesn't mean the council's going to do it, but they're seeking to have land allocated for development. And that's the land that's been put forward by landowners around Scampton. And as you see, it is massive. So if these are the numbers of housing units that are calculated to be possible on these bits of land, just by applying a simple ratio to it. And it would lead to a huge influx of population and a massive spread of urbanisation. That's not going to happen. I'm absolutely certain that the councillors and their officers will not be making that sort of allocation in the Scampton area. But it is likely, I think, that they will look at a smaller area, and there may be some benefits. And if we relate this back to what we said about the community facilities, at the moment, the facilities that are there couldn't be sustained by the number of people living in a village, a conventional village, the size of Scampton Estate. And as we've seen, the functional linkage between Scampton Village and Scampton Estate is not as good as it could be. So it leads you to think that the village probably isn't adding a lot of support to that at the moment. So to maintain those into the future, it is probably a good thing to allow for some growth of Scampton Estate, if it's possible. And there are question marks over that relate partly to the ongoing requirements of the RAF as far as the red arrows are concerned, and some of the impacts that might have on development constraints. But if it's possible, then generally that sort of red ringed area seems to be the area to concentrate on. And that needs to be looked at in the same context as trying to envisage what the scenarios for the future of the operational part of the base might be. So we know that the heritage of RAF Scampton is a very important asset, and we know that there are opportunities to really make a lot of that asset in the future. That's not all that might be an opportunity for the future. So it could be that with the big changes that have to be made in aviation technology, then perhaps there's research and development opportunities. So an ongoing operational link for aspects of aviation research into the future as well. Based on what's happened on other bases, then we know that it's likely that there will be business interest in some of the buildings, some of the land. So it's likely there will be some degree of business development and redevelopment and expansion in the area. There's agricultural opportunities. A whole lot of the runway area was obviously once fields. Some of it could revert to that. I've also made reference to the renewable energy opportunities there, and those two things aren't necessarily incompatible. And relating the agricultural opportunities of the wider area, because this is obviously a big agricultural area on a national scale as well as a local scale, then some of those businesses might well, just as they do at Thames or Cliff, be oriented towards agro-industry. So that's the sort of thing that might be happening there. As I've said, it's important to get this balance between employment and housing, as well as the balance between the facilities being retained and some degree of growth of population to maintain them. So if we took that area, retaining all of the open spaces that there are, but building on parts of the fields, but again, replicating the same sort of generally spacious layout, then there seems to be potential to add, I don't know why I've said homes, but about 750 homes in addition, taking that up to 1,150. And again, these are purely estimates. And that would increase the population gradually. This won't all happen overnight by any means. So gradually over quite a few years, that has the potential to increase population from 920, which is roughly what we think it is at the moment, to perhaps 2,650. So that's the size of a sort of medium-sized Lincolnshire village, and it might well be enough to maintain something like the level of facilities that are there at the moment, and perhaps add some new ones as well. So that's the area that seems to have some potential for that. And the next slide I'm going to show you, don't take that as being a picture of what is to be. This is purely a very, very diagrammatic representation of some of the principles that you probably want to take forward in developing that area. So you want to create new linkage through to the road here, so that you're not dependent on that one road there, so that you can link the community here through to the centre. You'd want to maintain and improve connectivity across the estate, so it doesn't take you as long to walk from the house over here to the house over there, and so that all these really come together in one village. It doesn't have to be as strictly gridiron as that. Within this, there will be lots of green spaces, because I think one of the, as I've said, one of the principles you want to carry forward is that one of green spaciousness, and that's part of the sustainability of the place. But generally, in terms of access linkages, that's the sort of thing that perhaps could form the starting point for some form of development going into the future. And those are things that we'll be recommending. Well, if it does happen, these are the principles that we're recommending you take forward. That's what we'll be saying to West Lindsey District Council. But these are also the things that we really want to discuss with you now. If you would like to know more about the placemaking framework being prepared for Scampton Estate, please email us at enquiries@thinkopenplan.com. Thank you.